All right, so we've covered the while loop. Now we're gonna sort of a count controlled and a condition controlled, and we'll probably see some of the while loop kind of stuff as well coming back. But we're gonna jump into something called a for loop. Okay, this is count controlled, where the while loop is condition controlled, while true or false, right? And then I use the count to make it true or false, right? Because I used a comparison. Okay, so in this situation, count is less than upper generates either a true or a false. Okay, so while is condition controlled. We made it sort of count controlled, but it's condition controlled. The for loop, on the other hand, is just straight up count controlled. Okay, so a count controlled loop iterates a specific number of times, whereas the while loop, it just iterates while the condition is true. Okay, so a while loop is good for condition based. A for loop is good for the number based. Like if you know the number, that's a really great way to do it. Okay, so use a for statement to write count controlled loops. It's great when you know the number of things, right? So if you have some sort of a sequence of items or whatever. Now, we haven't talked about lists or anything yet, but this is the way, oops, I don't want to drag that. This is sort of the way that lists are iterated over. This right here, this variable, for variable, I can call it X, I can call it I can call it dog, I can call it cat, whatever. This variable is called the target variable, the variable which is the target of the assignment at the beginning of each iteration. Okay, so in this statement, for variable in this list, so in between these square braces is a list, okay? It'll grab this list, and then for the first iteration, it'll grab val1, and it'll put it into variable. For the second iteration, it'll grab val2 and put it in variable. For the third iteration, it'll grab val3, so on and so forth, and then do statements, okay? So this is the target variable. Okay. Now, obviously, it's count controlled because if I have, say, 3 things in the list, it's going to go 3 times, right? If I have 10 things, it's going to go 10 times. If I have 20 things, 20 times, 250 times. Okay. So for the for variable or the for loop is great for data sets. Fantastic for data sets because a data set has a finite size. While loops aren't great for data sets. They're great for going through things that you don't know the size of. Okay. You don't know exactly how many times you're going to go through it. Okay, so that's the way the for loop works. Now, this is a little demonstration of it that I kind of just indicated to you. So I have a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So the first iteration, num is going to equal 1, right? So it's going to print out 1. Second iteration, it's going to put 2 in num, so it's going to print out 2. Third iteration, it's going to put 3 into num, and then it's going to print that 3. And then 4, and then 5. Okay, that's sort of what that looks like. It just takes the thing out of the list, puts it in that variable, and then moves it along. Okay, so what we are going to use most of the time, well, not most of the time, about half the time is we're going to use something called the range function. So we've seen input, we've seen print, and now we're looking at range. So the range function simplifies this process because it creates this iterable object. Okay, so when we're looking at this, we have this list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what range will do, it actually creates a list filled with numbers that can be iterated over. Okay, so again, it contains a sequence of values that can be iterated over. Okay, so it's an object that just basically spits out a list that starts somewhere, goes to somewhere by some sort of a step value. Okay, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. So range characteristics, and you need to know this because it's going to be asked you on quizzes and on tests. If you give range a single argument, it's used as the ending limit or the upper bound. What are we going to count up to? Okay. If it has 2 arguments, it's going to have a starting value. So where do we start and where do we end? Now, keep in mind, this is inclusive. Starting value is inclusive. Ending limit is exclusive. Okay. So it won't go all the way up to that value. So you have to add 1 if you want it to go to that value. Okay. And then the third argument, if you throw it at range, if you give it 3, is step value. Okay, the step value is you can count it by 2, you can count it by 3, you can count it by 10, you can count it by 100. Okay, so to demonstrate this really quick, what we're going to do, and actually I'll actually show you the target variable as well. The target variable, it references each item in the list. Okay, and I'll show you that over here. Okay, so coming back here, we're going to just write a real simple for loop using the range function. Okay, so the way that we normally would do this, and if you've seen Python ever before, you're going to be a little bit familiar with this, but the way that it looks is this. So for x, okay, so the x is the target variable, And then we're going to invoke the range function. Okay, so range with the parentheses. Now, if I give it just one argument, 10, that means the ending limit. Okay, so what we're going to do is then we're just going to go ahead and print x. Okay, now I want you to think for a second. What is going to happen here? Okay, what are we going to see down here? Is it going to basically be this, or is it going to be something else? So I want you to make your guess, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. There you go, 0 through 9. Okay, ending limit is non-inclusive. Okay, so if we go to 100, now it counts to 100, right? You saw how much I had to do with a while loop to get it to do this? With a for loop, I literally did it in 2 lines of code. Okay, for 1,000, boom, goes up to 999. Okay, now the cool thing about this is we can also tell it where to start, right? So I can actually say, I want you to start at 2 and count me up. And there you go. 2 is inclusive, so starting limit's inclusive, and then ending limit is non-inclusive. So it goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, does not include 10. If I wanted it to include 10, I can actually just go to 11, right? So it goes 2 through 10 at that point, okay? So that's our starting limit, or our starting value, and there's our ending limit. Now we can also do this step. So let's go to 2 to 20, and let's go ahead and count by 2s. How about that? So let's go ahead and run this. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, right? I can also count by 3s if I want to. 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, right? I can count by 10s if I want to. So we go 2 to 200. Actually, let's go 10 to 200. And let's count by 10s. Boom. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110. Okay? This is the step value. So it goes 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and that's that 10. This is the ending value non-inclusive. You'll notice how it gets to 190. It doesn't go all the way to 200. I could go to 201 and make it do it, right? So there's 200, but it's non-inclusive. And then 10 is the starting range, okay? Now what's happening here is it starts out with 10 because 10 is the starting value. It puts 10 into X, and then it prints 10. Second time, it adds 10 to 10, and it goes to 20. So 20 is put into X. Okay, and then we print 20. Next time, it's 20 plus 10, which is 30, 30 plus 10, which is 40, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, till it gets up to 200, essentially, and then it says, hey, 201, I can't go above that. Okay, so that's the for loop using the range function, and we do this all the time. Now, to show you that list concept, what we can do, we can actually create, for val in some list, okay, and I can do 2, 4, 6, 7, 9, whatever. Like I can just create these arbitrary lists, right? Now what you're going to see is if I print val, it's going to print 2, then it's going to print 4, 6, 76, 9, 65, blah, 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 right? It'll just print out those things in order. You see that? Okay, so if I had some sort of a list, which I actually could assign to a variable, lst equals, 2 from whatever, I'm just making this arbitrary, okay? You can see now that I can actually just throw the name of this list into there, and I can actually print all those values out, okay? So what ends up happening with range is range essentially, range creates a list for you. That's what it does, okay? So when you're kind of thinking about what range does and how range works, that's how it is, okay? So that's your for loops, sort of in a nutshell. And again, the target variable allows you to access the values in the list. Okay, now this would be really, really nice, right, if I have names, and in this I have Adam, and we'll dive into this a little bit later, John and Steve, right? So now what I can do is I can actually do for name in names, right, because I know exactly I can print that name, right? So now I can actually print, hey, look at those names, Adam, John, Steve. And I can even go one further than that. I can say if name equals Steve, print name, right? So now I can check to see if Steve is in there, right? So boom, I print that, Steve is in there, all right? Or you could actually just say, name found. Okay, now what's cool is I could actually create a variable for the input name, and I can ask the user, enter a name, And now I can actually compare that right here to in name. Okay, so I can actually go through that list using a for loop, and I can say, hey, can I find something? So enter name, I'm going to enter Adam. Hey, it says the name is found. All right, so I can enter John. Okay, hey, the name is found. I can enter Steve, right? Name is found. Okay, so essentially I just create this list. I take user input, which generates a string. For each name in names, I do this. And then I compare it, and I can create that with a for loop, okay? So that's sort of what the for loop looks like. It's a count controlled, and that target variable allows you to access. So this right here, this is the target variable. And you can print that out, and if you're in range, it'll just print a number. If you're using a list, it'll print the values in the list, okay? So we're gonna pause for now. I want you to mess around with those target or those for loops a little bit, and then we're gonna jump back on the other side.